The calculation of light from sand to silicon. We are in a time where we can create whatever we want. The question now is, what tools to use? Hey guys, welcome back. This is a video I'm super excited for. I've been waiting a long time to make it. I finally have finished comparing the two render engines, Octane and Redshift, and I want to share my results with you. So first off, I just want to say this, I always say this at the beginning of these types of videos. Don't get too stuck on what render engine you're using. You should be more focused on developing your skills as an artist. However, the render engine you select can greatly influence your workflow and render times. So before we jump into the nitty-gritty details of the speed, breaking down the scenes, how the lighting looks, I want to talk a little bit about the overview of the two render engines, which is something very important to consider. So first, let's start with Redshift. Redshift is a bias render engine, and it's proud about that. What a bias render engine means is basically you can bias your light rays and samples to certain parts of the scene that might need more attention and focus and are a little bit more noisy. This also offers more control over your scene and how certain aspects react to certain lights in your scene. Like I said, because Redshift is biased, you have the ability to cheat so you can get faster light calculations and faster render times in theory. We're going to be testing that. Okay, let's talk about Octane, the render engine that is near and dear to my heart. I love Octane because it is unbiased. So basically what that means is you're going to brute force all your light calculations. With unbiased render engines like Octane, you have less control over your scene and your light calculation, but you get realistic results really quick out of the box without changing much settings because all of that's done for you inside of the engine itself. Basically with Octane, you can get down to business faster and not really worry about those back-end settings for optimizing. And I want to make an argument here that I haven't really seen a lot of people making, and that is Octane is technically a biased render engine. Technically everything's biased because it's all fake in CG, but you can change GI clamps, numbers of light bounces, all of these settings. We really can't simulate light like actually behaves in the real world because that would be a crazy amount of photons and rays to simulate. So with things like adaptive sampling, GI clamps, ray bounces, static noise, all of these things really are your biasing your light calculation, which is totally fine. But I mean, calling anything a unbiased render when it's all made in CG is kind of a little bit deceptive. So like I said, I've been testing Octane and Redshift for about the past 3 weeks, and I have some interesting findings and results to report back to you all. And I took some notes on some stuff that I liked about each render engine and some stuff I didn't like about each render engine. So let's start off first with talking about Octane's pros over Redshift. With Octane, in a couple of clicks, you can get a really realistic result. Redshift, on the other hand, requires a little bit more clicking through and changing settings to kind of dial in the look you're going for. I would say that for at least me, it's not a ridiculous amount of settings you have to go through for Redshift. One of the things that I was scared when first starting to learn Redshift is that I would spend 30 minutes setting up a scene and finally being able to make creative decisions. It's more like just a couple more clicks. It's really not that big of a deal. Or your workflow is just a little bit different than mine and you really want to just be engrossed in the scene itself. You don't want to make back-end changes. Then Octane is probably a better choice for you. Another thing that I love about Octane is the node editor. It is super simple and very visual, especially when compared to Redshift, which is really just blocks. Octane, you get pictures. I like the way that everything connects a little bit more, and I like how everything is shown, all the nodes to plug into. I really wish there was a setting for Redshift so where you could display all the nodes. Maybe in a future update, who knows, but the Octane node editor is so much more simpler, so much less stuff to do to get a realistic result out of it. I would say on average, it'd probably take you 20% longer inside of the Redshift node editor, depending on who you are and how good you know the scene. but it's not a ridiculous amount. I just really love Octane's node editor, how visual it is. Another pro about Octane, maybe it's a pro, maybe it's a con, depending on who you are, but the simple render settings. Like I said, with Redshift, you gotta dive in a little bit deeper. Octane, you really don't have to change that many settings to get the look you're going for, which is nice. I would say it's a good balance between control and complicatedness. This kind of falls under everything, but in Octane, there's really just less work to get things done. Like I said, with the node editor, with render sampling, and also like displacements. Redshift, you have to add a displacement object, do tessellation. It's just a couple more steps inside of Redshift to get some things done. Not saying that's a ridiculous amount of steps, just saying it is a couple more steps. Honestly, after using Redshift for 3 weeks, I've kind of worked these steps into my workflow, and I barely notice a difference between the two render engines now. So now that I've talked about the pros of each engine, I want to talk about the render time, which is something I'm sure y'all all want to know about. I really wanted to tell y'all all of that first, that way I wouldn't get flack in the comments, because some people just, well, you know. So I just wanted to give you all that background information, everything you need to know before I show you these results. And I will say, they are pretty shocking. Okay, so this is the scene. This is a very simple scene. I wanted to keep it as simple as possible to leave out the most amount of variables and render times and differences between the engine. So basically wanted to bake this down to the most simplest thing we could do while still demonstrating the difference in speed between the two. So first off, I want to say this was rendered on two 2080 Ti's. Each scene was rendered in separate project files, and when Redshift was rendering, Octane was not opened up, and when Octane was rendering, Redshift was not opened up. So there's no like conflicting of resources between the two programs. So this scene right here on two 2080 Ti's took 55 minutes to render. Each frame on average was 21 seconds, and there was 150 frames. This scene right here, with the exact same lighting setup in the exact same settings, at least as close as I could get him to the other render engine, took 21 minutes to render. Average of 8 seconds per frame. So there is a huge difference between these two. I'm going to show you the settings. So if you haven't guessed already, the first scene that took 55 minutes was Octane. Here's my settings right here. I'll justify them a little bit. I basically wanted to match the noise between the two render engines, so I used 1,000 samples. Also, I didn't really want to do any adaptive sampling or anything because it left weird holes in the volume. And to be truthful, at this 1,000 sample threshold, the adaptive noise wouldn't even kicked in at that point. So as far as optimizing goes, you can see my settings right there. I tried to match Redshift to as close as I could to this scene and kind of see how everything looks. It definitely looks different. When I say it looks better, I'm not really sure. That might be up to you. It looks like there's a little bit more light bouncing around, especially from the volume onto the back of the cube if you zoom in here. But it's really kind of hard to tell. Also, a balanced board would kind of just solve that issue on both sides in general. So there you go. So here's Redshift. And I'm not sure if this is fully optimized. I feel like I'm a pro at optimizing Octane because I've been using it for such a long time. But here's my settings, and I really just wanted to get the most realistic result without sacrificing too much render time. Honestly, settings could be dropped down a little bit, but at 8 seconds per frame, that's really, most of the time it's spent loading the scene at that point that I was like, there's no point. So if you see my settings and you're like, hey, you should change this, this will greatly reduce your render times, or hey, you should do this, this will reduce your render times, tell me below. But yeah, this took 21 minutes to do, average of 8 seconds per frame. Both of them are at 1080p. So now that I've been using Redshift for the past 3 weeks, I want to go a little bit unscripted on this. I have notes and stuff, but I really just want to talk to you about what I think about the engine, especially from an Octane user. So I've only been using Redshift for 3 weeks, so I might not know everything about it, but I have watched the Grayscale Gorillas training and some other tutorials online, and I've really dived in and spent as much time as I can inside the render engine. First off, I want to say I love the Redshift camera. It gives you more settings over lens flares and just more control over how everything looks. You have color curves, which is really nice because I like to color things For my job, I actually am a videographer and I do some color work as well, which is really nice because Redshift gives you a little bit more of in-camera control. But yeah, out of the box, I like Redshift's camera a lot more, and I feel like it's a little bit more integrated with Cinema 4D. Another thing I like about Redshift, and this might just be my opinion or my feeling on this, but I actually like the bucket rendering option. So if you don't know about Redshift, basically there's like the super quick like render preview, and then you can also jump into a bucketing option where it takes your GPU, creates a bucket out of it, turns it into a square basically, and renders like a square. If you're used to CPU rendering, it's basically the same thing. Instead of with cores, it's number of GPUs, which is kind of funny. But yeah, the bucketing option is really nice, and I actually prefer it in my workflow because I feel like with the bucketing option, you can calculate your scene faster and have way less noise versus Octane. I feel like it takes a long time to load all your samples in and keep going. Like, have you ever seen that green bar at the bottom? It takes forever to kind of get out of that noise threshold. With the bucketing option, it takes literally just that square that is rendering to get out of that noise threshold, which is nice. Another thing, which this is kind of unexpected, with the control Redshift offers, I feel like I can optimize the scene as much as possible, so it's not going down to just how much GPUs you have. It's more like how smart are you about creating your scene. So guys, what does this mean? Well, basically what this means is using these settings on this specific scene. I can't stress this enough. I'm not saying every single scene is going to be like this, but when the past 3 weeks working with these two engines, I will say that Redshift, usually Redshift is 50 to 60% faster per scene and per frame. But this doesn't necessarily mean Redshift is better. Redshift, like I said, workflow-wise, you have to do a little bit more. Honestly, it's not that big of a deal, especially what I saw people made it out to be like. People were like, oh, the node editor is horrible, and I'll definitely say I'm not good at the node editor. I can only make basic materials. I definitely more pro at Octane node editor, but I've also been using Octane for a lot longer, so that's something to consider. Also, like I said, I can't stress this enough, guys. You can't really match the settings between the two render engines because they're literally running on different code. So this is as close as I could get it. I'll leave a download below for everyone that's in the Patreon. You can download the scenes, you can download the project files, and download the render results and check it out for yourself. You can also just, if you don't have Redshift, you can just use the free demo version. You literally can use that for as long as you want. The only thing is it's watermarked, but if you're just testing out the render engine, that's no issue. So this is kind of just surprising to me, and I was a little shook. I knew that everyone said Redshift was fast, but literally pretty much more than twice as fast. I also wasn't expecting like a lot of problems inside of Octane, for example, like hot pixels, just weird noise in certain areas of the scene are really in existence in Redshift. I would say overall Redshift's noise pattern is a lot more nicer and finer and more realistic, and Octane's noise pattern is very visible, which means you're gonna have to turn up your sample rates higher to kind of get rid of that. If we're talking about still images, it really doesn't matter, noise patterns and stuff, but when you have noise patterns that change on animations, that's when you start to see those weird artifacts and stuff that you really don't want to see. That's everything in the video. I encourage you, if you're a Redshift user, I encourage you to go check out the demo version of Octane. If you're an Octane user, I encourage you to check out the demo version of Redshift. Learning more about Redshift helps me better optimize my scenes and understand Octane more also. Also, I feel like as an artist or freelancer, whatever you are, knowing more programs is not gonna hurt you. It's gonna definitely help you. And I feel like production-wise, a lot of people are moving towards Redshift. I think it's a little bit newer than Octane. It's definitely less established on the tutorial side, but I think it's a really big up-and-coming engine. I think it's gonna really make some strides in the next year or two. Okay, that's everything, I promise. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you wanna see more comparisons and stuff, you can check out my Patreon below. Also, you can leave a comment, and I'm really dedicated to making tutorials, talking to y'all, whatever it is y'all need, leave a comment below and I could potentially make a video about it. I want to do some system build videos and stuff because I'm really into computer hardware as well. So that's something that I personally like also. So combining rendering and hardware, really cool stuff. But yeah, basically guys, thank you. If you liked the video, please subscribe. If you liked it, please leave a like. And for all of you that support me and everything, I'm dedicated to making the best videos for y'all. So I really hope you enjoyed this one. And yeah, I'm gonna stop rumbling and we'll move on and I'll make some more tutorials for y'all. Okay guys, thank you, peace out.